Hello everybody, welcome back to the Jazz Project and welcome to the KSP POV version where we are now taking the space plane to Eve. I'm very excited about today's episode. However, today's episode ended up taking so freaking long because of the engine that we are using. It's somewhere between a nuclear engine and an ion engine in the fact that it is very efficient but has a significantly low thrust. So a good portion of today's episode was spent just simply getting out into solar orbit and then getting ourselves over to Eve and then getting captured by Eve and all that, all while dealing with an abysmally low thrust to weight ratio. So we are going to speed through a lot of the boring parts, but we'll still show you the entire process as it took to get out there. Hello everybody, good day. We are fully fueled. At the end of the last episode, we did the refueling process and return. So we are not only completely loaded up on liquid fuel, but we also are completely loaded up on ore as well. And that ore is what we need in order to power our OPT engines. And so we are good to go. Nothing else left to do. In the last episode of the Jazz Project, where the third-person perspective crew went out to Jewel, they had to do so from Minmus because of the fact that they had to land on Minmus in order to refuel, whereas we are simply in Kerbin's orbit. So they had to use some Delta V just to get into orbit, whereas we have the advantage to just simply push ourselves out. And because of the fact that with the third person perspective, they also utilized some of their liquid fuel and regular engines to push them out into solar orbit due to a little bit of impatience. But we're going to have the patience on this side, and we're going to use, even though it has low thrust, we are going to use our OPT engine to push us out basically the entire way. If we can avoid using liquid fuel on this route, that would be great. We don't have as many places to go as in Jewel because Eve only has the one moon. However, it is still a significant journey, and I mean, once we conquer Eve, you know, if we're back in orbit, if we have the fuel, the Delta V, I mean, we can just start heading to another planet. This craft is good enough and capable enough. So anyways, here we are lined up to our target maneuver, and we have our OPT black hole resource created. We have enough electrical charge, which is also a very important factor. You can't have your black hole dark matter production start too soon to when you're actually supposed to execute your maneuver, because then you won't have the electricity to run your engine. But here we are lined up with our prograde. Doesn't exactly matter the node. We're not trying to execute this maneuver exactly. The only reason why we have this maneuver is because our periapsis was not lined up with where we want our ejection burn to be handled from. So we decided to create our own maneuver to adjust the periapsis, put it in this spot, and then once we have a comfortable elliptical orbit, we can just get rid of the maneuver entirely and do it all manually. So that's what we're going to be doing coming up next. So we see here the pinkish purple glow of our engine. Yeah, there's not going to be a lot to do here. I'm going to be spending a lot of time just watching it go and then time warping the footage to save a little bit of frustration, because again, the recording of this episode probably took about 5 hours. The whole trip to Eve took a significantly long time. It doesn't normally, but because of the fact that we're using the engines that we are, you know, we're basically kind of getting free Delta V by using this engine. The fact that it's not using any of our liquid fuel in these deep space burns and stuff is a little cheaty, but you know, we pay for it. Well, I pay for it in having to sit here and wait. I don't like physics warping while recording episodes because there are oftentimes problems when you physics warp, and sometimes you're either inaccurate or inefficient or simply can straight up explode. So I typically don't like doing it, so that means that I'm sitting here the entire time. So a 14-minute burn will be 14 minutes for me, so I pay for it one way or the other. As you can see from our navball screen, we're actually only accelerating 7 meters per second, so it is a little bit, maybe a little bit faster than a nuclear engine, maybe not. I guess it depends on the engine. The ELU engine that we have is has some considerable thrust to weight, so, but nonetheless, it is about as efficient as an ion engine, just slightly more powerful. So we're going to go ahead and kill our throttle yet again, and then we're going to time warp our way right back to the same spot, and then just do the whole process over again. We're going to break our burn into several events, and just constantly keep pushing our apoapsis further and further until it eventually breaks out into the orbit of the sun. Now, we are also not doing this on an optimal Eve transfer window. The Eve transfer window is about a year and 221 days, I believe, 23 days, somewhere around there. And I didn't really feel like there's no problem to wait that long. There's really no downside to waiting that long. It's not going to count against us in the Janus project because we're not trying to do this based on time. We're doing this, based on episodes. But, so we could have waited for the appropriate transfer window for the most optimal efficiency. However, just feeling a little impatient, and I realized I could just get myself into solar orbit and then just snag whatever interception I can find that's relatively efficient out there, because we're going to be using the OPT engines, like I mentioned, for the majority of this episode, and like I mentioned before, it has low thrust to weight, which means that any maneuver that we want to plan, we have to be very careful with it, because we're probably not going to be able to do it all in one go unless it is out in deep space, because we just don't have enough time at our periapsis here, orbiting Kerbin. We just don't have the ability of spending, 14 minutes burning at our periapsis, because, 14 minutes will take us the entire way through our orbit sometimes. And so, we got to be a little more careful with it. That's why the third-person crowd, KXP, decided to burn their liquid fuel because of the impatience. But I can do a little better than that. Anyways, coming back up to our periapsis, we burned somewhere around a minute and a half or so to the periapsis, and then we don't burn for very much longer after that. We're just kind of pushing our apoapsis out, and so if that means adjusting where our periapsis is, that's okay. But because of the fact that we have such low thrust, and it is a little bit harder to read the time to periapsis once it's passed, because it starts increasing and then decreasing. So just kind of eyeballing it, playing it by ear, not really doing anything but flying by the seat of our pants. But that is okay, because Valentina is an experienced pilot and can handle just about anything thrown at her. So our apoapsis keeps climbing higher and higher, faster and faster, and soon it'll pass 1 million meters. The height of Kerbin's sphere of influence is somewhere between 8 and 10 millimeters, if I remember correctly, so we still have a ways to push out. We still have a few more passes to do, but because of the fact that we are getting faster and faster each time, it's going to take less and less effort. A lot of this episode is just going to be kind of focused on our screens as we make our maneuvers. There's not a lot of windows out of this craft, which was unfortunate. I was hoping to utilize one of the cabins that had a little bit better view, but this particular model was the most ideal. But when we see Earth rise out of our window, we decide we can at least get a little bit better of a view of it. So I'm going to go ahead and tilt myself sideways to bring the Earth back into my view, just at least a little bit. It is a waste of resources. You know, we don't need to use this monopropellant, but it is hard to pitch it over without it. So we can afford it a little bit for some convenience and some aesthetics. So now, once again, we're just time warping our way closer to our periapsis, where we'll just repeat the process. It's gorgeous. Looking at those mountaintops, it's interesting to see the topology and the fact that they're sticking out above the clouds. That might be the tallest peak on Kerbin. We visited that a little while ago, but nonetheless, pretty fun to see out here in space. This game is gorgeous. I've been playing the stock version of it on Mondays as I teach new players a few parts of the game. I decided to do so in the stock without any mods whatsoever, because that is how most new players will be playing. And even things like visual mods, you know, clouds and scatter and all that, I decided to do away with. And it just goes to show how starkly different stock KSP is as opposed to modern day modded, and just how beautiful those mods end up making it. The game itself looks great, you know, it runs great. You know, it is very low, I wouldn't say low resolution, but low detailed, I guess. Not nearly as full and lifelike as these are. Alright, pushed ourselves out from 1 million meters to 2 million meters. Doubled our progress in a single burn, which means that the next burn will take us even farther. And we're pretty soon going to find ourselves out in orbit of the sun. Go ahead and time warp my way to the next burn, but I don't slow it down in time, and I find myself whipping right past my periapsis. So I'm going to go ahead and come around again. Thankfully, we're not suborbital, so it's not going to matter all that much. All it means is that we have to do another burn, which is why we're not trying to maximize our efficiency using a transfer window, because it would be hard to keep the schedule of the transfer window when we have to make this many burns just to get out of the atmosphere. You know, that's going to give us a delay, and so we're going to have to account for that delay by trying to get out of the, excuse me, not the atmosphere, the orbit, trying to get out of the orbit early to account for that delay. But at that point, then that changes our entire itinerary in general, so it's a little bit of give and take, and so I decided to just ignore the efficiency aspect of it and brute force our way to it, especially since we have, well, you know, essentially free Delta V using the OPT engine. There's no point in not just utilizing that power to just take whatever opportunity we can. So now we are at 5.5 million meters, pushing even faster, 6.5 million meters. In either this push or the next push, we will be able to break free entirely. That's pretty good. It's very exciting once we got to this. It took about an hour and a half just to get to this part. I believe maybe an hour and 20, you know, generously. But at this point, I'm seeing that we have an apoapsis of 17 millimeters, which makes me think that my estimation of the 10 million meter ceiling was completely off entirely. I think I might have been thinking about something else for that, but I end up finding out that 98 millimeters was about closer to what we wanted. Kind of bummed that our periapsis is on the dark side of Kerbin, so we don't get to see the planet nearly as much now that our orbit has extended this far. But that's okay, because we are going to have a lot nicer things to look at soon enough. New colors, new topology, new sites. It's going to be great. I'm excited. And we have our ScanSat aboard because of the fact that the KXP crowd was able to find an anomaly pretty easily and was able to travel there pretty easily. I think I am going to try to make that part of this journey. Wait, there you go. 93 millimeters is what it took to get out of Kerbin's Sphere of Influence. But yeah, I am going to make that part of the journey, is to try to visit anomalies, or as many of them as possible. Maybe not necessarily all, but we'll try to see. We'll try to get all if we can. But yeah, I want to see what there is to see. You know, I checked out all the points of interest on Kerbin. Might as well check out all the points of interest in the solar system, or at least the special points of interest of the solar system. So now we are officially out in solar orbit. Not the first Kerbals to do so, either in the program or in ours, you know, because another Kerbal from our program is currently stuck in solar orbit, but she has a maneuver planned for whatever the closest and most efficient plot to get back to Kerbin is. We'll get a little warning to transfer to her, and we can go ahead and bring her home safely. But now we have the long journey, several hundred days to go before we hit our next maneuver, and this maneuver should bring us closer, not completely to where we need to be, but closer to Eve. And for that, we're not going to need to build up the OPT black hole. It killed all of our electricity and took about a third of our ore, but it was worth it. And now we've built up enough electricity. Again, we have enough fuel, and with 3 minutes to the node, we're going to go ahead and fire. It's actually a lot longer of a burn than that. I did the math of the amount of seconds it said and then tried to burn accordingly, but because of the fact that it is the OPT engine and it takes significantly longer than it says, I probably could have done a little bit better with my timing on that. I feel like for efficiency's sake, it wasn't the best. But nonetheless, after a significant amount of time, we get ourselves a lot closer. I'm going to make our maneuver very close to where we are now to utilize the black hole that we've already built, because it does decay over time and then disappears entirely. So if we wait too long, then we will run out of that resource and we'll have to burn more ore to make more. So therefore, if I can just get this burn within the next few hours, we'll still be able to utilize the black hole resource that we've already gotten. It's a little tricky to kind of push ourselves into an approach because of the fact that we are not in an ideal transfer window. But I do eventually get an encounter. However, whenever I focus on Eve, I can't find it. I feel like it's a glitch. Maybe it's just barely an encounter, so I go ahead and give it a little bit more retrograde, but still nothing. I don't see it until off in the distance I realize that we're actually doing a flyby of Kerbin. In order to achieve this flyby of Eve, we need to slow down enough to fall back into Kerbin's Sphere of Influence, pass right on through, get a little bit of a boost, or a slowdown if you will, and then that will be enough to bring us to Eve. And so that was actually kind of fun, an unexpected part of the journey. I've test flown this particular thing several times, most of the time unsuccessfully, so this still is a little bit of a crapshoot on whether or not I can achieve it, but because of the fact that it takes so long to get out to Eve, all my test flights, if there had been a problem, maybe I just didn't fly well enough, or I time warped too fast and burned up in the atmosphere without, slowing down or anything. All those problems made truly testing this and perfecting my mission a lot harder than doing so on, Min-Miss or the Mun. But, so this is, with both the Jewel and the Eve, it is kind of anyone's guess on certain things, whether or not I can even achieve it entirely. But, So, you know, I was happy to see things kind of coming out a little bit correctly. Oh, but the whole point of why I was saying that is the little flyby of Kerbin was definitely unexpected and definitely not part of any of the simulations that we had done thus far. So there we are. We're going to go ahead and pass back into the sphere of influence of Kerbin, far enough away and low enough that we're not going to actually be able to see anything. So we go ahead and just pass right on through like 2 ships in the night, back out into the solar orbit, and then once we are there, we see that the encounter with Eve is back on the map, and now we can actually see it. It's a nice low polar pass, which is great because we are going to want a polar orbit of Eve if we can. Like I mentioned before, we're going to have our ScanSat going, and the best way to do that is in a polar orbit. But we are going to need to make a mid-course correction if we want to utilize any of Eve's atmosphere to aerobrake. We're going to go ahead and pop it in sideways for now, but eventually we will change that around. Eve's atmosphere starts at 96 kilometers, so we're going to just leave our periapsis there for now, but we will drop it down lower later. But when it comes to the OPT engine, you kind of need to start with good enough and refine from there to really be able to take advantage. I missed my maneuver by a few hours. I just time warped too fast, but it took nothing to really just shift that maneuver forward a little bit and then just take care of this. That's why I do like maneuvering in deep space, is because of the fact that your orbit is so large that there's so much time in between each portion, each percentage of your rotation, that, you know, if you miss a maneuver, it's really not that big of a deal. You can just scoot it forward a little bit and try again. So we're going to go ahead and fine-tune our approach using our RCS and bring ourselves down below the atmosphere. We start off with 91, then we drop down to 75, and eventually our final approach comes in to be about 66, but then we'll adjust it after the first time. But start here, and now we are all set to come on in. We retracted our solar panels, we closed our bay doors, tucked in everything to make sure that we are most aerodynamically possible and won't rip off any pieces due to the heat or aerodynamic forces. So we don't have a map of it yet, so there's no point in bringing up the map, but we should bring up some sort of information to give us an idea of our apoapsis, our speed, our altitude, and all that. So we are actually going to do a lot of our flying back here, not in the cockpit, but back here in the engineer's desk, because of the fact that we have access to so many screens that can keep an eye on everything. But it is official, everybody. We have eyes on Eve, somehow seeing through the atmosphere for a little bit. Got to see the surface, which was fun. But the cloud layer popped in, and we are now no longer going to be able to see anything underneath. So if we want to land anywhere particular or have any sort of control of our flight down in Eve, we are going to need maps of it. So now we've hit the atmosphere, we are flopping around. Unfortunately, we are retrograde. I was kind of hoping to come in a little flatter, but nonetheless, we can utilize a little bit of our engines during this time to slow ourselves down. The most important part right now is that we get captured. If we don't get captured, it's going to be a very difficult time trying to capture on the other side of Eve, trying to brute force our periapsis down. So I decided, I didn't do this in any of my tests. This is definitely flying by the seat of my pants kind of maneuver here, but we decided to kick on our rocket thrusters, our closed cycle liquid fuel engines, to manage enough of a slowdown to capture. And as you see here, we are now in orbit. It is suborbital, but we are now in orbit of Eve successfully for the first time in the agency's history. And I am very excited to see where that takes us going forward. But for now, we need to lower our apoapsis a little bit. We can either extend our periapsis back out into space and then utilize our engines to lower ourselves. However, we could also just raise our periapsis ever so slightly so we're not nearly as low into the atmosphere as we were before, and just come through for another aero brake. That is a free lowering of our apoapsis. We don't need to use any fuel in order to do that. Just the atmospheric drag will be enough to slow us down. So that is going to be our goal for the time being. We're going to have to pass through a few times because of the fact that we aren't as low as before. Means that we have less aerodynamic drag, means that it slows us down less each time, but it does guarantee, well, it doesn't guarantee, but it does give us a better chance of not falling into the atmosphere, not dropping our apoapsis so hard that it becomes our periapsis and we are going to plunge below the clouds. I don't want to land, not yet. I want to get a scan of the surface before we go down. That thick cloud layer means that it's impossible to see anything, and so nobody's going to have a good time that way. So it is very important that we don't descend. The second reason why it's very important that we don't descend, and is I'm going to share with you a little secret that these Kerbals don't know, and hopefully they can't hear right now, but I have only tested this craft on Eve's atmosphere once to see that it flies, and it indeed does fly. However, the one attempt that I made to get it back into orbit from Eve's surface was, well, let's just say it was unsuccessful. I was not able to do so. So I do not have proof that we can actually return from Eve's surface. Lathe, I've proved that the craft can get off of Lathe's surface, single stage to orbit, but Eve is a completely different beast entirely. So ideally, we're going to try to go to Gilly first if we can. That way, worst case scenario, once we land on Eve and plant our flag and everything, if our Kerbals can't make it back, we can send a rescue mission. Just send a big old rocket, tons of boosters on it, and just get them out into space and back home. So if we have to, we can go save them that way. But if they land on Eve first, then that means that we have to send them the rocket, and then from there they have to go to Gilly. They can't head home until they actually complete the Eve program. So we're not entirely sure of our future here. We're not entirely sure of the game plan. There may be some changes as we go along the way. We may have to adapt to the situation as best we can. But for now, what we need to do is bring our periapsis down to about 500, a little over 500 kilometers, because that is the best way for our scanners to scan. And it's going to take a few passes, but given the fact that we only slow down a certain amount each time, means that we have some time to spend, and we can jump off the ride at any time if we need to. And at this point, I'm starting to feel fairly confident in the re-entry process, so I'm just going to spend the time at this desk. I'm actually physics warping my way through the atmosphere. Like I mentioned, I don't like to do that, but I found that it is safe enough, so I'm just going to time warp way around the orbit, physics warp my way through the atmosphere, and I'm bringing down my apoapsis bit by bit. And we're at an apoapsis of 2 million meters, and through this pass we're going to drop it down significantly yet again. And 1.2 million meters, we are close. I am only going to do it one more time. We're going to bring ourselves down to about 700 kilometers above the surface, and at that point I don't exactly feel comfortable going again, because I believe that'll bring us, at best case scenario, it'll bring us below 500 kilometers, but worst case scenario, that might be the last pass we do. So at 700 kilometers, I go ahead and plot out a maneuver to bring ourselves back to 500, and given the importance of this maneuver, I'm going to go ahead and burn my actual liquid fuel to take care of it, because I don't want to waste effort. I did, however, miss the maneuver node entirely, so I just said, you know, whatever, and I just burnt it when I could to bring myself to the right apoapsis. And so now that we're at 500, we are going to need to spend some significant effort to change our inclination. To do a scan stat, the best way to do it is in a polar, almost completely 90 degree, but not exactly, orbit. But that is going to take more delta V than we actually have in our liquid fuel. So at first I'm going to try to do this with my OPT engine, but given the fact of how aggressive of a plane change that is, it's going to once again take quite a lot of time. And I hope you appreciate that every time that we showed the OPT engine here, I'm speeding up the footage by thousands of percentages. So you know, it's going quite fast to save you guys some time. But nonetheless, we are going to give up, because like I mentioned, I've been filming for almost 4 hours by this point, and I am going to give up and spend that liquid fuel that we had spent so much effort saving this far, and we are just going to brute force our way. But even with this, it's going to be an 11-minute burn, so that's kind of awful, but it is going to take the majority of our delta V here, which means that we may end up having to land on Eve in order to get the resources to even think about rendezvousing with Gilly. It's just not going to be easy with the amount of delta V we leave ourselves. But I was so frustrated, so ready to be done with this mission, that I'm like, you know what, I will spend the fuel. I'll even spend some of the black hole. I made some more black hole, used some ore just to give myself a little extra thrust to push this orbit over. And with only 123 meters of delta V left, 134, excuse me, we're going to put in our final push. We're only going to use the OPT engine because we just simply can't afford the liquid fuel. But after that, we get ourselves, it's not completely 90, but like I mentioned, it's better to not be completely 90 because it does give you a little bit of a stray. We're going to plot in our final burn, which is going to bring our periapsis up to above 500, which is the ideal altitude for all three of our scanning devices. And all three of our scanning devices are going to give us everything we need to see except the low resolution versions of it, so that's good enough. Valentina, you've done a wonderful job flying. Lars, Kerman, you as well as our secondary engineer. So we are going to go ahead and hop them out of their seat. They get to take a break back in the cabin, the crew cabin, while the rest of the scientists and the engineers will spend the time analyzing the map data. And as we close out this episode, I wish those doors opened. I wish there was a slight animation for it, or at least, you know, force the player to press something to open it. But nonetheless, we'll just go ahead and phase our way through it. So now, like I mentioned, this mission is for mapping. If you're not aware, we are using the ScanSat mod, which allows for some really cool information gathering, and you can design some really cool missions around it. Just like I mentioned, like this whole idea of visiting all the planets is partly inspired by scanning all of them, getting all the maps. So as we time warp our way, does its thing, and we see here that we've uncovered basically the entire map. We still have a little bit of high resolution imagery to do, and we have a little question mark there that is representative of an anomaly. We'll go ahead and switch over to the biome mode, so we can kind of see all the different places on Eve that we can travel to and do some research for. This isn't a science vessel, so there's not a lot of research we can get from it, but still cool to see, especially given the fact that we can't see anything. As you see here, the 65% left on high resolution, and if we try to do visual, because of the fact that there's so much cloud layer, we can't see a single thing. I wish it did just show us the cloud layer, but nonetheless, it's just scattered information. So we're going to go ahead and do the rest of the orbits to fill out all the maps to make sure that they're all 100% or as close to 100% as they can be. And then in the next episode, we are going to make our way either to Gilly if we have the ability to, or we are going to descend into Eve, land on the surface, gather some more resources, check out that anomaly, and then try our attempt at getting back out into orbit. But that will be in the next episode of the POV part of Janus Project, because I've been doing the new Kerbal videos on Mondays. I've been moving the Janus Project solely to Fridays, so in the next episode, next week of the Janus Project, we are actually going to be in the third-person perspective, currently stuck on Lathe, having to figure out what to do from there. But anyways, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more of the Janus Project. If you did think about subscribing, drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.